Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee for Monday, April 22nd, 2019. Our first order of business this evening is approval of the agenda. Did anyone have any changes or additions to the agenda? If not, I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And agenda is approved. Next is approval of the minutes from the April 8th, 2019 meeting. Did anyone have any changes or additions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the minutes are approved. Next, we are on to employee recognition with Metro Transit. Down under Cloister.
Thank you, Chair. My job is to introduce a couple of individuals who will be introducing the recipients of the Transportation Committee recognition for awarding accomplishment. I had an opportunity to talk to him before the meeting, and so I'll introduce Mike McNamara, who will be presenting, as well as Jake Rooney, who will also be presenting.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the council. So the reason we're here tonight is we have four people that we see as having an exemplary performance for the Final Four weekend. Not necessarily one night or one aspect of it, but kind of as a whole over the course of the Final Four. The two big days, Saturday and Monday, for Final Four. So in the days leading up to the Final Four weekend, it was time to put the finishing touches on the months of planning that had taken place. As the assistant manager and EIC of the event, I reached out to the people that would be working post-event in the control center, which would undoubtedly be the most stressful task for our department. Three supervisors that commonly work night shift promptly volunteered to be the three mainline desk supervisors for both Saturday for the semifinals and Monday for the final for Final Four. Coming into post-event is a very stressful time. Not only were the games planning to get done right around or towards the beginning of the night shift, but post-event for any large event is undoubtedly some of the most stressful times in the control center for us. These three gentlemen seated behind me, they right away raise their hands and says, "I'm in." That's something that we don't see all that often with some of our supervisors. Most people shy away or tend to shy away from the challenge or remain silent. We're looking at who we're going to ask to take on the task. These three did. They owned it. They said, "We want in, and not only do we want to do it Saturday night, but we want to do it Monday night as well." These guys, they said, "You know what, we're going to come in." From that point on, they pretty much took and ran with it, which I was pleased to see, because there's a sense of ownership that goes along with that. They said, "We're going to come in an hour early. We're going to meet with the call operators or the extra operators we've got. We're going to sit down with them. We're going to go over the plan, and we're going to execute to the best we can." Saturday night, we weren't quite sure what we were going to expect for post-event because people were trickling in and out of downtown throughout the day. We really weren't quite sure what we were going to see post-event, and it definitely gave us a run for our money. It was far larger than any large event that we're used to, as far as Vikings games, things of that nature. Super Bowl was a little bit different animal because we had been able to prepare in a different way. So this one, running our trains for regular revenue service on top of Final Four events, was a little bit different. And these guys remained composed. They executed the plan exactly how we had talked about it. They recognized ways that we could improve for Monday night. They came back in the following night, Sunday night. We all sat down and discussed it as far as what took place and what we could do to improve for Monday night. We put those the plans for those improvements in place, and Monday night came in. It was like clockwork. Again, the reason we're here is these guys, they knocked it out of the park, and not only did they do it because it's their job, but they did it because they wanted to. So for them, we got Marty Jensen, Michael Taylor, and Joe Cheetah ran the three mainline desks for both evenings. I'll let Michael talk about.
And thank you, Jake. Mike, in the rail transportation department. I've got one of our operators here, Brian. Like Jake said, got great people to work with. Brian's an operator that you don't always hear him or see him, but you know he's out there doing all kinds of work to help keep things moving in the transport rate. Brian stepped up on Saturday. We had extra work out there. Came to the end of his work at 12:30 a.m. and be ready to go home, but found out we needed some extra trips made. Offered to run several extra trips, and then after that, he's a blue line operator, but the train was at a green line, and so he offered to take that train over here and catch a ride back with the supervisor. Got done a lot later than he was scheduled to, but really helped us out. Then on Monday, once again stepped up, found out we needed extra trips to run, and was able to do a couple extra trips again. Made my transit look just terrific during the whole event. I'm lucky to be part of a department that has 121 great operators, but Brian really stood out. So thank you, Brian.
All right, next we are on to the TAB liaison report. We have Peter Dugan here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the committee, General Manager Koester and Director Thompson. Also joining me tonight is my colleague from the TAB, Ralph Parsons, on the policy working group. I'll explain that a little bit later on, if I may. There are two non-consent items on your agenda tonight that went through the TAB at our meeting last Wednesday. Numbers 2 and 3. Dave Burns is here in the audience, as well as Joe Barbeau, experts in both matters, but I'll just give you a little snippet of it. The number 2 is the Transportation Policy Plan administrative modification to include federal performance measures. This is, and the second, number 3, is the Transportation Improvement Plan, the TIP, which is being amended to include those same performance measures. And the performance measures they'll discuss tonight are adding pavement and bridge, wear and tear, and then congestion management and air quality, also referred to as CMAQ. And just at a very high level, the TPP, the policy plan, if it's a bureaucratic detail, it can be a simple administrative modification. If the subject matter is funding or scope, schedule, it must be an amendment. However, the appropriate method for the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Plan, is amendment. And one note that they will make is that it was a change in reporting statistics on serious crashes, which affects the data. For information items, there's a new FHWA Division Administrator, Federal Highway Administration. They work mostly with Director Thompson, his MTS staff. Also, MnDOT Metro District Engineer, which is probably the most important engineer in the state. There's a new one that's joined and is a member of the TAB. His name is Michael Barnes, and he had a pithy comment that there's 2 seasons for MnDOT, snow and ice and construction, which was pretty cool. MPCA has a new Assistant Commissioner, Craig McDonald, the first time an Assistant Commissioner for Air and Climate Policy. And our friends at the MAC, the Metropolitan Airport Commission, let us know that there's a complete remodel of the baggage claim area that is starting, and that includes a 2-story sculpture which will go through a hole that is being drilled in the main floor lobby. The other information item was the regional employment and transportation flows. And what this is basically, it's a geospatial look, meaning geography related to locational analysis of, simply stated, where are the people in my city going to work, who's coming to my city, who's coming to my county, how are people going from points to points within the metro area. It analyzes travel patterns in transportation flows and also measures the busiest roadways, those over with 100,000 vehicles per day. It uses both census, which is 2010, and streetlight data. Streetlight is a private company that is a forerunner in the application of geospatial data to transportation. They use GPS, phones, surveys, varied methods to track how people travel. Another information item was the regional solicitation before and after study. This documents the regional benefits achieved by the regional solicitation and the Highway Safety Improvement Plan, also known as HSIP, on the region. So what is the cost benefit here? What does the regional solicitation do? How do you measure it? The solicitation is a qualitative measure. The HSIP, the Highway Safety Improvement Plan, is more of a quantitative. The projects are being tracked from 2007, so that would be the 7, 09, and 11, regional solicitations. One of the things you'll find out is that there's a significant delay between when the money is approved and when it's actually spent. So the next solicitation to be measured would be 2014. That money is just going into projects now. So it will be approximately 2 years before they can analyze that data. And then on the regional solicitation surveys, there were two types of responses. One were the technical from the applicant scores and a technical advisory committee. The others were for TAB, the policy. And the three of the top 10 points were transit, technology, travel demand management. That's actually measuring who needs what kind of transportation to get to and from. And then unique project, which you may recall was the Our Car in St. Paul this year. And then, of course, geographic balance. It also measures sensitivity, which is what is the value of the measures of the scoring data. And Director Thompson can help with this because he in some ways directed it, but a study of the BRT A line on Snelling, and it had two main points: no significant impact from what they call dwell time, at the time the bus stops or picks up and drops off passengers, no significant negative impacts, and it increased transit capacity and passenger throughput. On the customer satisfaction on the A line, got great marks. Its attributes are easy fares, hours of operations, and handling concerns and complaints, and improvements were hours, concerns, and safety. And just as an overview, the Transportation Policy Plan is a 20-year look at the region's approach to the metropolitan transit. How is the region being a steward of the funds that come into it through transportation? It is to be updated every 5 years, but it's a 20-year look. And it includes highways, transportation, bike ped, freight, aviation. The TIP, the Transportation Improvement Plan, is a part of that, but that is on a 4-year basis. It's more of a short range. And that is required in all modes of transportation, the ones that I just mentioned, and any project that is subject to federal funding. For the policy working group for the TAB, and Director Thompson is leading that charge. I've asked my colleague Ralph Parsons to explain what this is. He and I are the two TAB representatives that were appointed to the commission or to the policy working group. And it's the first time we've ever done it, and it's basically how to improve the regional solicitation. TAB member Parsons, thank you. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks, and I'll have any questions. Thank you all for your patience.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, real briefly, as we went through the process of making decisions this last cycle, a number of things didn't quite fit into the decision-making paradigm, and it became apparent to us that we really need to consider how to deal with them in the future. So, in short, things like how do we deal with transit funding, technology issues, travel demand management, unique projects that just don't fit into our categories, and there were other issues that came up, in particular geographic balance and equity issues. So the policy working group will meet over 5 meetings and bring recommendations back to the TAB. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Dugan?
Thank you all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And just of note, we do have a couple of council members also sitting on the policy work group. It'll be myself and Councilmember Cummings. Next, we're on to reports. We have MTS Director Thompson.
Madam Chair and members, I'll just add to that policy working group too is you're going to see a presentation later on here about an overview of the regional solicitation. And every 2 years, they update criteria and update how they score projects. And one of the things is that sometimes there's bigger decisions that are hard to understand, hard to get input on about should we make a major change in the maximum amount of funding. And so we created this policy group this time for a couple of issues that have just been kind of festering through this process and surveys and evaluations as a way to kind of make some recommendations to TAB and even to council about maybe some places we could make some bigger changes in regional solicitation. So that's what that's about this time. And you'll hear an update on the overall process. A couple other just updates of things about to occur. Tomorrow we'll be doing the Carver County tour. And a couple of the things that we're going to see there are projects that were funded through the regional solicitation, either that are completed or are about to be started. So they're always that area has always been a good recipient of federal funds through that process. Again, a reminder of the Metro Mobility Spring Convening on Wednesday if you're available. We have TAB interviews for the open seats on TAB on Wednesday evening. And then Friday and Monday, I believe you were invited to the Connected Automated Vehicle Workshop on Monday. But there's also one Friday. If the Monday time didn't work, we could sneak into that. So if you need any information about that, really looking through it's really a scenario planning exercise about where's the technology, where might it go, how might it influence our transportation network, and if it's going in certain directions, how can we influence it so it goes in the direction that's best for the region. Thinking about something that really is a 10, 20-year impact that's expected to have on our transportation network. So that is Friday and Monday, 2 separate workshops. They're the same type of workshops, but Monday is more geared towards policymakers, but Friday there'll be some policymakers available at that and some staff. And then legislatively, last week they took the week off, and it looks like it's starting slowly this week. I think there was one hearing on the Senate transportation bill, but we're in the last few weeks here, so we will keep you updated as anything important comes there. So with that concludes my remarks. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Director Thompson? All right, on to General Manager Koistra.
Madam Chair, today is Earth Day. I think there's supposed to be some slides coming up. I'm going to wait just a second. Okay, today is Earth Day, and this year some light rail customers will be experiencing it in spectacular fashion. In partnership with the University of St. Thomas, a light rail vehicle has been wrapped inside and out with images of a caterpillar becoming a butterfly and seasonal local landscapes. This artwork was designed by St. Paul artist Sarah Nelson. Nelson also designed the cover art for the book that St. Thomas students recently published. The book is about the transformational nature of riding transit and is based on interviews with riders. This project is part of our ongoing participation in the Sustainable Communities Partnership, in which undergraduate classes undertake small, manageable Metro Transit identified projects as part of their coursework. I'll wait for the next slide. Customers will soon be seeing more operator barriers in service. Technicians recently began installing the first of 150 barriers that will go on buses this year. Operators have the choice of using the barrier or pinning it back. It's a style that we were able to find, and the style was endorsed by a committee that included bus operators, technicians, and union leaders last year. Each of our garages will have 30 buses with barriers, and the barriers are going on some of our 40-foot buses and all of the bus rapid transit buses that are or will be used on the Metro A and C lines. This is also National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, and we took time to recognize staff at our Transit Control Center last week during National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. TCC supervisors play a critical role when it comes to responding to public safety events, dispatching and communicating with police officers, assisting operators, and responding to 911 calls. In 2018, the TCC handled more than 73,000 computer-aided dispatched police events, an 8.5% increase over 2017, and TCC also dedicates about 350 hours a week to law enforcement dispatch operations. And last but not least, the Final Four, Alliance Field. It's been an incredibly active month for Metro Transit. At the start of April, we already talked about the NCAA Men's Final Four brought tens of thousands of fans to downtown Minneapolis at US Bank and other festivities. As we celebrated at the end of the last week, the Blue Line and Green Lines had their highest single day of ridership ever on the day of championship Monday. That was over 130,000 rides. The prior record on that was the opening day of US Bank Stadium for the Vikings regular season. And that was a Monday night game against the Saints. So we beat that mark by about 8,000 riders. We provided nearly 160,000 more rides between April 5 and April 9 than we did on the same days of the previous week. After getting through the Final Four in the April Sorcerer, we also played a major role in the opening of Alliance Field on Saturday, April 13th. More than 5,500 fans took the Green Line or A-Line to the inaugural match at the stadium, and our service received rave reviews. Said one customer, "I don't know how many hours went into planning today, but my ride was bliss. No issues with overcrowding. Thanks for your hard work." And I'll just also mention on the Final Four, there was a media event where the NCAA organized, wanting to thank us for our work on the Final Four day. I think it got quite a bit of publicity. They gave us a game ball during the event, but they also, Kate Mortensen and her staff also presented us with a tapestry of the Final Four event, which I know meant a lot to them, and it means a lot to us. I was going to bring it here tonight, but with the rain, I didn't want to drench a tapestry. So I'll make sure I get it here when the weather's better so people can see both. So it was a nice event, and it was really evident they appreciated all the work that went into it. We recognized other people here this evening. And that's the hard work of our operators, and it's the hard work of our staff. And and I will say, the indication I get is they love these kinds of events. They love the challenge of it, and they rise to it. And I think it was marvelous results. But I think we have a little short video here on the Final Four fans.
Very easy form of transportation. This was pretty easy, and it's probably the most affordable public transportation I've taken as far as like metros. So I was really impressed that you had transit workers there offering guidance and answering questions.
We got stuck in traffic, and this is much, much better. And look, we're not even 200 feet away from our venue.
It was really nice and easy to get here. We got on right near Mall of America and took us right here, so pretty smooth.
We took the Metro. It was really nice. I mean, it was a really nice. I come from Chicago with public transportation, but that was really nice. Right. Very comfortable ride.
Oh, I loved it. Loved it.
It was
nice,
easy.
smooth.
It was inexpensive, $2.
We got on at Union Station and rode down.
Yeah, it wasn't a bumpy ride or anything. It was really nice. And the police were on there, made me feel safe.
Never been to Minneapolis before, trying to figure out how to get around. Took the rail, made it super easy.
We rode the Green Line, yes!
Yes.
We rode the Green Line.
We rode the Green Line.
Yeah. Thank you for naming it for our school.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with your system here, and very clean and nice, and we had a good time. And I love the way it works throughout the whole city. And for us, instead of walking back and forth, a little chilly up here than it is in Atlanta, and it was great being able to jump on the light rail and zip down here.
Thank you, fans, for coming out and taking our trains. Have a safe ride home.
Madam Chair, I'll just add, if anybody is watched, I love college basketball, but if anybody watched game day that day, It was set up at ESPN Game Day. It was set up at the Excel Center, and every 2.5 minutes, one of our trains is going by because we have 5-minute intervals between blue and green line going both directions, and so it was hours of ads for our service, and the trains were bright and beautiful, and it was really fun to watch.
Thank you. Councilmember Atlas and Gibbertson.
Hi, Councilmember Gonzalez wanted to know who won the game.
Thank you.
Well, Madam Chair, Virginia won the championship.
I'm more of a soccer person.
Yeah.
Councilmember Fredson.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you and congratulations to your team for all the work that went into the Allianz Field opening. I think there was a lot of skepticism that all of the, game goers could actually get the game on time and enjoy all the festivities. And I think even the press coverage in the run-up to the game expressed that skepticism. And I didn't hear a single complaint from a single person. And you didn't really see complaints in the paper and the media either. So job well done, and hopefully people just continue riding Metro Transit to Loons games.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions for General Manager? Very good. Thank you. Now we're on to business. First thing is our consent agenda. We have 2 items on consent. Does anyone wish to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Okay, I have a motion there, a second.
Second.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the consent items are passed. Now we move on to our non-consent items. The first one is item 2019-78, Southwest Light Rail Transit contract for Bass Lake Spur Freight Rail Maintenance and Repair. And Jim Alexander, welcome.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, Council members. I have an item to present related to Southwest LRT. I'm Jim Alexander, the project director for the Southwest LRT, and maybe just I'll start off with a little history on what this is all about. This maintenance contract we're looking to endeavor on. So this is the alignment of the Green Line, at least the eastern portion of the Green Line extension. And you'll see in the reddish or pinkish is what is called the Bass Lake Spur. Previous ownership, going back pre-2018, was owned by Canadian Pacific. And you'll see TC&W. TC&W is really the primary operator through all these tracks I'm talking about. The other piece is the Kenilworth Corridor, which was previously owned by the Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority, KCRA. And through the project, we purchased the Bass Lake Spur. It was gone through the FTA approval as well. And the Kenilworth Corridor was transferred from the county, from the Regional Railroad Authority to the council. And those 2 pieces are needed in terms of for the project. Will be impacting about the 3.8 miles of east of the Bass Lake Spur and all of the yellow in the Kenilworth Corridor. So as we look at the current freight ownership, you'll see the Bass Lake Spur is now owned by the Metropolitan Council, and TC&W continues to be the sole operator through there. And in the yellow, Met Council as well is the property owner with TC&W, the rail operator. CP does have operating rights on this leg, but they don't use that. And the other piece I want to draw your attention to is in the lower right corner is the southerly connector. This will be built as part of the Southwest LRT project, and it's needed because as we look at the freight infrastructure that's there today on the Bass Lake Spur, it's all on the south side of the corridor, and that's where LRT is going to go. So we're going to be moving that freight tracks are going to go into the middle of the corridor. So there'll be a trail on the north side and a single freight track, and in the middle, then LRT on the south. And because of that, the connection that exists between what's called this M&S Spur, which is owned by Canadian Pacific, and the Bass Lake Spur, there needs to be a reconnection put in place, and that's where the southern connector comes into play. So I'm speaking of these alignments because we're essentially looking to hire an entity to take care of the maintenance of these facilities. So a little more background. Back in 2018, in the April timeframe, the council executed a purchase agreement with Canadian Pacific to acquire the Bass Lake Spur. And we acquired the whole 6.8 miles because he had said, if you're going to impact the 3.8 miles, we want you to buy the whole thing. And so you see the 3.3 miles to the west, we aren't impacting that, but as part of the deal, if you will, CP said you need to buy the full piece, and that's why that's all in play here. The other agreement we had in 2018, this was about the July time with TC&W, and this is related to construction because TC&W will continue to operate during construction as well as after we're done with construction for operating LRT. And there's also a co-location agreement with TC&W. So this essentially requires a path for TC&W to vacate siding track. There's about 10,000 feet, or sorry, about 16,000 feet of siding track that will be removed as part of the project, primarily located in Hopkins, St. Louis Park. And TC&W will also cooperate with our contractor during construction. And then, and part of this arrangement is the council will construct freight rail improvements, including new rail in the center of that corridor again, and ballast ties, signals. We'll have 5 shared crossings with TC&W across roadways, and there will be gates at those crossings. We'll also have some various number of bridges and retaining walls, and freight equipment that will detect problem axles. It's the freight runs through the area, and it also reestablishes that connection that I spoke of, that southern connector in St. Louis Park near Louisiana. And then we closed on the Bass Lake Spur in December of 2018. Similarly, for the Kenilworth, we closed in December as well, the county. So during construction, the Bass Lake Spur, we're going to be responsible for the inspection, maintenance, repair, and flagging dispatch activities within that 6.8 miles. And so we have identified North Shore Track Services through a competitive procurement process to provide those services. And it's divided into 2 segments. So there's the Bass Lake Spur West that I spoke of, that 3 miles, and then there's the east part, the 3.8 miles. Our contractor, London McCrossan, will be responsible for taking care of that 3.8 miles because essentially they control the site, if you will. So as you can imagine, if a contractor is building a roadway, they would control that roadway and control the signals. In this case, it's a railroad facility that the contractor will maintain for us while they're under contract. So on the Bass Lake Spur West, that the services would be looking to start in July of 2019. Currently, we have an agreement with Canadian Pacific to maintain that portion up to the end of June 30th this year. And this contract looks to take on that responsibility after June 30th. And that would take us into revenue service 2023. That's the current anticipated revenue service for LRT, the Southwest LRT. And so on the east, that contract, the North Shore Track Service would take on that maintenance piece after our civil contractor essentially is finished with their work. And that's anticipated in the 2022 timeframe. So that at that time, North Shore would take that over into 2023. Now thereafter, once we get into revenue service, we look to go into a new contract. We'll look to figure that as well for a long-term arrangement to have maintenance responsibilities taken care of on the freight. So just here's a graphic in terms of those, just the delineation between the west and east. So, Madam Chair, Council members, the recommendation for this business item is for Council to authorize the Regional Administrator to award and execute Contract 18P387, Bass Lake Spur Freight Rail Maintenance and Repair with North Shore Track Services Incorporated in the amount of its low responsible bid of $1,530,433.64. And the term of the contract is through 5 years. I just would mention this North Shore is, I think they've been around since about 1991. They're up in Duluth. That's where they're based at. So, Madam Chair, with that, I'll happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Alexander? Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious, so this section, the Glencoe Junction that TC&W owns, the Met Council didn't try to acquire that. Are there advantages, pros and cons to own versus not?
Madam Chair, Council Member, the Glencoe Junction is what being referred to in the far left, the lower left. That's actually owned by TC&W. That was not impacted. It wasn't really part of that Bass Lake Spur. It's kind of unusual that you have islands, so to speak, with this Bass Lake Spur. A long time ago, CP owned Points West, but that's now owned by TC&W. There really wasn't any reason for us to get into the arrangement for that because it's far enough outside the project that it wasn't going to impact it. So just never had that reason for that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Cummings?
Just a question of curiosity. How many companies are there that do the kind of work that North Shore Track Services did that provide bids for that kind of contract?
Madam Chair, Council Member, in this particular procurement, we had 2 bids for this. Railworks was the other bidder.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, then I would entertain a motion to approve the business item.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right, on to the next item of business, item 2019-83, TPP administrative modification. We have Dave Burns here.
Good afternoon. I'm David Burns. I work for MTS as a senior highway planner. Just gonna give you a little background here on performance targets in general, and the action today is a request to do an administrative modification to the Transportation Policy Plan, Chapter 13, to incorporate these adopted targets. So we're not here actually, just to sort of explain this away a little bit, we're not here to adopt the new targets. These have already been adopted. They were adopted in 2018. This is actually just an administrative modification to Chapter 13, the Performance Outcomes chapter of the TPP. Point of clarification, administrative modifications do not affect fiscal constraints or projects of regional significance. These targets were adopted in November of 2018 by the previous council, which was in order to meet the federal requirements for when they needed to be adopted by. Due to the timing, we just missed out on these being incorporated in the Performance Outcomes chapter of the TPP. So this administrative modification will pull all of these performance measures into the existing TPP chapter and update the safety performance measures from 2018 to the adopted 2019 targets. In terms of the performance measures that are federally required, there's 5 broad families involving safety and highway safety improvement program performance measures, pavement and bridge performance measures, system performance measures, congestion mitigation and air quality performance measures, or CMAQ, and transit asset management performance measures. Due to some concerns and confusion that were brought up in other committees, we felt the need to better explain how the safety targets in particular were set and clarify the reason why the 2019 bike ped target changed so dramatically from 2018. And in reality, it's kind of a simple explanation, to be perfectly honest. First off, safety targets are required to be updated annually. These safety targets were adopted for the 2019 safety targets were adopted by the council in January 2019. And the reason for the change in the safety numbers was that there was a significant change in the way that serious injuries were defined. So data for 2015 and earlier used just confirmed serious injuries, whereas data for 2016 and onward used confirmed and suspected serious injuries. So the result was a significant increase, around 64%, in reported serious injuries from 2015 to 2016. Importantly, the previous target, the 2018 target, is based upon the 2015 base year data, whereas the current 2019 target is based on the 2017 base year data. So the result, which you'll see in table 13.1 of chapter 13, was a dramatic changes, particularly to the bike ped safety targets between 2018 and 2019. Just to illustrate that a little bit, because of this change in methodology, we see a significant spike between 2015 and 2016. It went from somewhere around 131 in 2015 to 201 in 2016 to 214 in 2017. The previous target that we set, well, it's important to remember that this is primarily due to the change in the definition from confirmed, suspected, or confirmed serious injury crashes to confirmed and suspected serious injury crashes. So the previous 2018 target was 112. It was based upon a 5% annualized reduction in both from the 2015 base year data for both fatalities and confirmed serious injuries. The final 2019 target is 190, and that is based off the 2017 data, which was 214 serious injury crashes and fatalities, and it's based upon an annualized reduction in fatalities from 2017 of 5% and a 6% annualized reduction in suspected and confirmed serious injuries from 2017. So that's all to say. Basically, for these adopted targets, we wanted to kind of explain away why it looked like the targets were so much higher for these safety measures than the 2018 targets. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the presenter? Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Can you share how these targets are used in our work, how we influence the meeting of these targets, or otherwise, why do we care about this information?
Yeah, Council Member and Madam Chair, these are federally required. We use these ultimately to help plan and program projects that ultimately are implemented throughout the region. So we monitor these on a regular annual basis, set targets accordingly, and ultimately they're used as if safety becomes more of an issue, budget for projects would be implemented so as to address safety issues to a greater extent, hypothetically.
Could you give an example of how this information has influenced a specific project? Or you can get back to me on that.
Director Thompson.
Yeah.
So, Madam Chair, Councilmember, the first question is, right now there's no federal link between where your performance measures are going and like your funding of allocated federal funds. That's a question that often comes up, is if we don't meet this target, will we gain or lose funding? And that link isn't there yet. But it's not to say it couldn't be in the future. We're really, performance measures at the national scale are in I'd say the infancy stages. This allows us to standardize some measures and compare to other areas. And so we often will use, how are we doing in safety? How are we doing in pavement versus our peers? Peer comparison. So right now they're not influencing directly, I would say, a project, the performance measure down to a project level. But these performance measures match with what we want to invest in as a region. Preservation of our existing infrastructure. Safety is one of the priorities. Some of the transit asset protections, and so they're confirming a lot of the decisions we're making at the region. But if the trends start to go in the wrong way, I would expect things like regional solicitation may prioritize. For example, if the bike ped safety became a trend issue that is getting a lot worse, maybe that would get more points for projects that would reduce bike or safety related to that. So it'll inform investment decisions where money's being allocated. But I don't think there's necessarily a tie specifically from federal to a specific project yet. But there could be. Using performance to decide where your investments come, I think is an aspect of what we do in our region.
And just a quick comment, we did have a presentation at TAB last week talking about some of the takeaways from regional investments, and there were some significant safety improvements that were highlighted, and we can get you the link to that presentation because I found it very helpful. So, all right. Any other questions for the presenter?
Just one
Councilmember
briefly.
Gonzalez.
If you can tell us what's the difference between a confirmed serious injury and a suspected serious injury?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. And so the difference between a confirmed and a suspected serious injury is how the emergency dispatcher actually logs it in into the system. So a confirmed serious injury would be something where they know at the scene of the incident that the person has sustained a serious injury. A suspected serious injury is where it's more of a judgment call, but where they believe that the injury is going to end up as a serious injury, but they have not confirmed that. So somebody might be transported to a hospital, something like that, with a suspected serious injury, but it has not been confirmed at the scene of the incident.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to confirm, so there is one bucket that combines fatalities and serious injuries. They are not separated out in these statistics. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just for bike and ped measures,
Right.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, if not, I would entertain a motion to approve business item 2019-83.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a first, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the business item passed. Thank you. Next, we have Joe Barbeau to present on item 2019-84. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this item is to incorporate performance measures 2 and 3 that Dave Burns just talked about, pavement, bridge performance measure, and congestion management air quality, into the transportation improvement program. Transportation improvement program, I think I discussed that last time I was here, is an annual program of projects that are 4 years of federally funded projects. The federal government, US DOT, requires that we include the performance measures in the TIP by May 20th of 2019. We went through this step last year with the safety performance measures as they were due last May. And so those will change every year along with some of the changes that Mr. Burns talked about. But the step we're taking now is to incorporate into the current TIP, the 2019 to 22 TIP, the other 2 performance measures for air quality and pavement bridge in order to keep the TIP updated. So this is a second time we've done this. Since the last time, we'll have to do a late change to the TIP just to incorporate this language. We do that because we don't actually have to do that, but if a TIP amendment were to be applied for, it might not be able to be approved by the Federal Highway Administration. So it's safe just to incorporate this language in the TIP at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for the presenter? All right, if not, I would entertain a motion to approve business item 2019-84.
Motion to approve.
We have a first, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. Thank you, Joe. Thanks. Next, we are on to business item 2019-85, which is the same week item, adoption of Amendment 2 to the 2040 TPP. We have Amy Venowitz. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. Amy Venowitz with MTS. So the action that is before you today, you have seen a couple of other times. You had information items, and 3 weeks ago you held a public hearing on this action. So we're bringing it back for final approval today. The proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council accept the summary of public review and comment, which I'll go through in a second here, and adopt amendment number 2 to the 2040 transportation policy to amend the Gold Line locally preferred alternative by extending the alignment and adding a station in Woodbury, and amending the I-94 highway construction project in Maple Grove and Rogers to include the addition of general purpose lanes. So as a quick reminder, you just adopted an administrative modification to the TPP. That is one way to change the TPP. The other way to change the policy plan is through a full amendment. The difference between those two actions, they both result in changes to the policy plan, but the difference between the two actions is that an administrative modification, such as the performance measures, tend to deal with policy or are more technical type changes. They don't always have the same level of public review that an action such as an amendment, which addresses either fiscal constraint of the policy plan, or will add or remove or change a project that is in the policy plan. Those are different because the fiscal changes have a much higher level of public review and comment. The policy changes can have that level of review, but don't have to. They might be more technical in nature. So that's the difference between the two actions that you have taken and are going to take in a second here today. So as a quick reminder about these changes, the amendment does two things. The first action is to lengthen the Gold Line by about 0.6 miles in the city of Woodbury and add an additional station near I-494. Then we are also changing an existing highway construction project that is in the plan, but we are broadening the scope to include a general purpose lane add between Dayton Parkway and Highway 101. So we will adopt the plan to the TPP amendment, and then you'll see two more items on your agenda that deal with that same project today too. As part of the public comment period, we opened the public comment on February 27th and closed it on April 12th. We held a public hearing on April 2nd. In total, while the public hearing was not super well attended by commenters, we did engage over 300 people through the entire process, primarily through social media, people accessing information about the project, and also community group meetings. We received only 5 formal public comments. 2 were in support of the Gold Line project, 2 were in support of the I-94 project, and 1 comment really was about how the council makes decisions regarding transit way prioritization in total, and essentially wondering why a project in the city of Fridley had not been funded. So that is related to transit ways, but not to the 2 projects that we're adding to the plan. And the full response to that comment from the city of Fridley is in the text of amendment number 2. I was not going to go through that today, but I can answer any questions on it. And I can answer any questions on the projects in total. And I guess we're ready for a motion.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Benowitz? All right, if not, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2019-85, the same week item.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second? Second. All those in favor, or any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Amy. Thank you. All right, next we are on to business item 2019-86, which is also a same week item. It's 2019 through 2022 TIP amendment. And welcome Joe Barbeau back.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is another TIP amendment to change the actual content of a project. And so the proposed action from the tab is that the council concur with tab to amend the 2019 through 22 TIP to change the cost and description of MnDOT's I-94 concrete overlay project and to add an associated project for temporary widening and crossovers. So there will be 2 projects that are impacted by this TIP amendment. The larger project, the Interstate 94 expansion project, is seeing an increase in cost, which at this stage is fairly normal, fairly commonplace. In fact, TIP amendments are only required if a certain threshold is met, a certain percentage threshold. Actually, I don't believe this cost even meets that threshold, but the other thing that's changing is you'll see the addition of language, rest area parking lot improvement, and way in motion technology, and well, those 2 items. Secondly is a project that would create a temporary construction elements, temporary widening and crossovers during construction, and that's the second project on the list. And so those two, that would be added to the TIP as a new project. Both of those would be, or that would be a 2019 project. That's the current year that we're in. That's all I have.
All right. Any questions for the presenter? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval of business item 2019-86. Same week.
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Joe. Next, we have business item 2019-77, also a same week item, a controlled access approval for I-94, and we have Tony Fisher here.
Chair and committee members, my name is Tony Fisher. I'm a highway planner here in MTS, and I'm here to share with you a controlled access approval request for the same project that you approved the TPP amendment for a moment ago. So controlled access approval is something that's described in Minnesota statute. It refers to controlled access highways. We interpret that to freeways. So this is something really apply to freeways in the Twin Cities. The purpose is really so that those freeways are built consistent with the transportation policy. So this is a process that applies to the 7-county area, not the MPO area. There's a subtle difference there, but because it comes out of statute, it reflects the 7-county area. So this refers to new freeways, which aren't very common. So more often you're going to see this kind of thing come through with new interchanges, lanes on freeways, or new access on a freeway. And the statute refers to the timing of this to happen before acquiring land or constructing these projects. So in practice, the way this process presents itself is that staff coordinates with the sponsor agency as they develop the project to develop that in a way that's consistent with the transportation policy plan. Toward the end of the project development, once they have a completed environmental document, they present that to us with a cover letter that describes the project, describes the needs that that project is addressing, and then it would normally land up for consent agenda. It's not on your consent agenda today because it is a same item. So just a short slide on what the approval request is about. This, again, does refer to the 94 project that you saw in the TPP amendment a moment ago. And so that's the added lanes part of that project require this controlled access approval. This approval is also requesting, we're also requesting approval for a Dayton Parkway interchange. It's part of a separate project, but it was studied on the same environmental document. So that's a new interchange east of where 94 and Brockton Lane currently cross. Currently there's no access at Brockton Lane. This will be a new bridge to the east with full access. So as part of that project, the Federal Highway Administration did require an auxiliary lane from that eastbound entrance to the 610 exit. That part of the project, that part of the federal requirement was incorporated into the 94 project. So MnDOT is expecting a finding of no significant impact in the next month or so here, and begin some temporary work this summer. Adam, happy to answer any questions.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Fisher? Councilmember Chambliss.
Mr. Fisher, Madam Chair, I just wanted to clarify, are you saying that it was not a consent item because this was a same week change?
Chair members, correct. That is, normally you would see this on the consent agenda. It's more of a routine process, and then a couple of weeks later, it would go to the council again on the consent agenda. But because of the timing of the TPP amendment going today to Transportation Committee and Wednesday to the council, we're kind of following the schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so if I may, so as we will be talking here shortly about what goes to consent and not consent, anything that's same week is moving through committees before it goes to full council all in the same week, so they can't be on consent. So if it's not on, if it's on our consent, it would naturally go to consent council. So that's why it goes through the non-consent process here.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Thompson?
Madam Chair and members, also for this project, MnDOT had asked us, but based on the construction schedule, to kind of try to find ways to accelerate the TPP amendment and the TIP amendment and this last item here. So that's why the package became same week. Just because once this goes, then they'll be close to authority to award a contract. So we're trying to save some time for them at that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for the presenter? All right. If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve item 2019-77, same week.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the business ayes passed. Thank you, Tony. And I guess you're up next, so we will see you very shortly. But we have to decide now so what goes on consent to the council. Typically, our consent items go consent. So I would propose that. I would also propose that items 2 and 3 go as consent. I think number 1 could go to the full council, and as we discussed, all the same week items go to the full council. Does anyone have any disagreements with that or changes? All right, very good. All right, now we are on to our information items. We're going to welcome back Tony Fisher to here again to talk this time about the freeway system interchange study.
Thank you, Chair, members. And for this presentation, I'm with Michael Everett from MnDOT. This is a joint study between our agencies, and I'll be giving the presentation, but we're both happy to answer any questions you might have. So this is what we're calling the freeway system interchange study. And I just want to give a couple of slides of context of highway investments before I jump into the study. So when the Transportation Policy Plan talks about highway investments, we're definitely talking in a universe that is fiscally constrained. And this is a universe that needs to consider operations and maintenance activities, snow plowing, pothole repair, and just basic maintenance of signal systems to keep things running day to day. Preservation of existing assets. You can see large pavement projects going on around the region, bridges, a new deck, or even complete replacement of bridges falls into this category oftentimes. Safety is, of course, important, and that you can see that it's standalone safety improvements. But what a lot of people don't see is that there are actually a lot of safety improvements embedded into preservation projects. It's really a good opportunity to efficiently improve the safety of those projects. So the category that we're here to discuss today is regional mobility. And that comes in a few different flavors. But the TPP prioritizes technological improvements. It's really a low-cost way to improve the efficiency of the system that we have. So these are things like ramp metering and incident management systems, those types of things, cameras and detection devices on the roads. The next priority in this mobility category falls under what we call spot mobility improvements or low-cost, high-benefit. These are really targeted improvements really targeted at a problem. Maybe a turn lane, maybe an auxiliary lane between two neighboring interchanges. Pretty modest investments, but we're starting to talk about construction at this point. MnPass is the next priority in the Transportation Policy Plan. It has several advantages over general purpose lane, so that's prioritized over those general purpose lanes. And then general purpose lanes is going to fall into what's described here as strategic capacity, or the bigger investments. There's also a category in the Transportation Policy Plan about around multimodal investments like tram freight too. So if I can bring MnPass into the strategic capacity definition, again, MnPass lanes, we give advantages to HOVs, to transit vehicles. We allow users the ability to buy their way into that lane when they need to, so it really provides a lot of reliability for everybody in the region. Also, in the strategic capacity bucket would be traditional lane ads. You've got a 2-lane road that's over capacity, it's widened for lanes. Auxiliary lanes sometimes get to be longer. They could fall into this category, or even just a straight through lane on a freeway. It's not manageable. In the region, we do a number of intersection to interchange improvements every year. I think of a good example, 252 is a funded project, 6 signals along 252 that is working towards being converted to a freeway with some small number of interchanges. And then the focus of this study is system interchange improvements. So I'll jump into that study. This is a type of study that we do here to investment prioritization study. where we take a category of investments and we look at the universe of possibilities of the Twin Cities, and we really try and prioritize those options that we have for investment. So when I say system interchange, I'm talking about where two freeways cross, so you can see any traffic signal or stop sign at these locations. This Cloverleaf interchange is a pretty traditional example of that. So in the past, when there have been needs at these types of locations, they've really been evaluated independently. Is this feasible? Do benefits exceed cost? Is the money available to make this happen? And we're trying to do this in a more systematic way than we've done in past in the past, the way we've done the low cost, high benefit projects in studies, series of studies labeled congestion management safety studies. So we'll have a better sense of where each location falls in terms of the opportunities list. So of course, we're looking at crashes and congestion and a couple of other issues you'll see in a moment. Let's see. So as I tried to describe, we're trying to systematically discover, prioritize the opportunities across the region as consistently as possible. We want to reduce delay and crashes. We want to especially consider the needs of freight transit when we do that. And we want to right-size these investments. When we say right-size, we really want to build solutions from the ground up, not start with a larger vision that might be a more symmetrical, pleasing to the eye vision. But if our improvements start to see diminishing returns, we really want to cut off the investment before we get to that point. That's what we mean by right-sizing here. So an example of the type of improvements that might be coming out of the study, this is the 494 and 35W interchange. And you can see here that the northeast loop has been replaced by a directional ramp. This is a project that was awarded funds through a competitive solicitation called the Court of the Commerce program. And this project this element is going to cost on the order of $70 million. So that would cover that, replacing that northeast loop, but then also to the west, you can see where the entrance and exits where you normally have to compete with the other traffic for space. In this case, those movements are bridged, so it's a much more efficient, much safer design, also more expensive, so it's not quite, but in this case, it was warranted. So this project includes the one directional ramp, two of what I'd like to call bridge breaks. Really the grade separation of those ramp. But just for an example of kind of what we're about. So the study started out with a number of possible locations and really formulated a definition of where two freeways crossed and eliminated these blue dots as not meeting that definition. And so the yellow triangles are the locations that we started out with as the possibilities here. And when I say two freeways, we tried to be kind of liberal with the second freeway in that mix. There are roads like Highway 13 that have seen a lot of investments over the years, some big interchanges, still have some traditional and great access. So it's starting to look like a freeway, not quite there. For the purpose of the study, we included it as a freeway. We are out trying to engage our stakeholders. We've got a technical advisory committee made up of 7 counties. We have a representative from Region 7W. Local governments are represented, the Highway Administration, of course, our agencies. And then we've been giving presentations like this to the Minnesota Freight Advisory Committee, Transportation Advisory Board, State's Capital Improvements Committee, and others. So this is a view of our study in a nutshell. One slide. We started with that on the left, the study interchanges. We are working towards more focused locations and feasible locations. We're trying to categorize problems. We've measured the problems and prioritized a number of locations. And we're trying to further reduce our list based on the types of causes of those problems that fit with what the study's trying to accomplish here. So eventually we'll get to developing concepts and evaluating those for benefits and costs and hopefully some regional priorities. These are the measures that we started out with to start to reduce the entire list down to a manageable level. So you can see reliability really involved in the congestion category, half the weighting, and then safety, transit, rate,
other important factors here.
Important to note, this is based on feedback we got from our technical advisory committee. So it included the partner counties and a few cities and agencies. And again, yeah, just to illustrate Tony's point, it's showing that in this case, safety and reliability seem to be about equally important to people. Mobility is probably the strongest, of course, freight and transit needs. So when we came to kind of our criteria and sort of weighting things, mobility issues tend to be the largest factor, followed by the others.
And part of the reason mobility is prioritized over safety here is because the types of investments we're trying to prioritize are really they have safety benefits, but they're really targeted to the problem. For a pure safety problem, there are other treatments that are quite a bit more cost effective. So this is where we are today. We've the black dots have been filtered out, and we're at green dots today as we collect more information to further reduce this list to a manageable level. We're start to pencil sketch solutions with engineers and different agencies and evaluate those benefits and costs. So we are analyzing the interchange problem to really understand what is causing that congestion or crashes that we measure. We're going to be developing solutions to evaluate. That would suggest implementation priority. It's not as simple as build the first one first and the second one second. We'll be considering planned preservation activities if there's a bridge replacement, if there's a large pavement investment area that can influence priorities. What might come first. So we're hoping to have a report by the end of the year, maybe January, February of 2020, and then incorporate those results into the next update for transportation policy. To answer any questions.
Councilmember Fredson.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry if I missed this. So in the, let's see, slide 11 of 13, you have the 1 through 6 scoring in the green dots. Is that consistent with the weighting, or what does the 1 through 6 mean?
That's a good question, and I wish we would have removed those numbers. So the green dot locations are actually all being carried forward to the next step. And we actually studied the locations. We studied them by each approach. So if you have 2 freeways crossing in the traditional way, you have 4 approaches because they might have different causes. So that refers to the number of approaches that map the thresholds.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sterner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Corbett and Mr. Fisher, I'm just kind of wondering if you, just a little talking points on the MinPass. I kind of know what it is, but is there like things you can say, how many people use it? What's the revenue we get out of it and things like that, just if there's some things you could, share on that.
So for the most part, I think there's some confusion around the revenue. It's mostly there to operating costs. It isn't the kind of thing that in some places where there's quite a bit more congestion, quite a bit more usage, you can start to really build projects from that. Not to say that's impossible, but it's just a different here in a lot of places. In some places.
Chair and committee members, I don't know the numbers offhand, the latest and greatest. My understanding, the most recent numbers that I'm aware of is that revenues from MinPass systems were in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 million. Expenditures were close to that. For maintaining the system, all the software transponders and things like that. There is a small amount, I think, that in certain years there can be excess bit of revenue collected over operating costs, and a lot of it goes towards sort of future development, future tracks, things like that. As far as usage, I can certainly get that to you. Off the top of my head, I don't.
Okay.
Okay, Director Thompson had a comment.
Madam Chair, council members, we'd be glad to give an update on MinPass in the future. There are several MinPass lanes under construction or about to be. The way to think about the usage is it's Metro Transit or Express Bus users are using those MinPass lanes.
Yep.
It's carpools, and then it's the MinPass customers. I think the last report is there's over 50,000 people signed up for the MinPass transponder using on the system, but we'd be happy. It's a very well reported system, and we could talk about usage in that at a future if you'd like. And then talk about what investments are occurring or about to occur in that system. We'd be happy to bring, I don't think we've brought that as part of any orientation, but we'd be happy to bring that back.
Just to follow up, Madam Chair, and Mr. Thompson, the other thing would be looking at is, I mean, I know we're looking at ways for revenue and we're looking at gas tax and things like that, but I'd be like looking at, they looked at raising that cost of the min pass or what the fees are, what that price point was where people won't pay it, and if there's another nickel or dime per use on that, that they'd look at too, if that's something to be in the report as well.
Madam Chair and Council members, I think MnDOT recently completed a state mandated study of the potential of revenue for a toll system and beyond just MnPass. And that's a report that I believe is final, and we could share that too. And so that kind of looked at really from the revenue standpoint, is tolling broader a potential source for transportation infrastructure here in the state? So that's something that might be of interest to you that we can share.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much. All right, next we have Paul Lamb and Dave Hanson on the Hennepin Avenue downtown reconstruction. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm Paul Lamb. I'm a project manager in the engineering facilities group with Metro Transit.
And I'm David Hanson, Assistant Director of Field Operations and Bus Side for Metro Transit.
And we're here to update you today on the Hennepin Avenue reconstruction project in downtown Minneapolis. The project we're going to talk about today is a City of Minneapolis-led project. They are going to be reconstructing Hennepin Avenue in downtown from Washington Avenue to 12th Street, starting this year and going the next several years. The reason they're doing that is because the last time there was a major reconstruction or infrastructure improvements was 30 years ago, and a lot of the pavement that they have there today is degraded. The usage along Hennepin Avenue has changed, both in the street and beyond the curb on the sidewalk. So they're looking to improve multimodal options as well as safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. From a Metro Transit perspective, this section of Hennepin Avenue is a heavily used local transit corridor, providing up to 11,000 people getting on and off the bus per day, 500 trips, a lot of connections to east-west local service as well as the light rail line. What the city is doing is they're doing a full roadway reconstruction, which means from building face to building face, they're removing and replacing the sidewalk as well as the road. They're also removing the center left turn lane and taking the space used from that, or that was used by that, putting it behind the curb and putting the bike lanes behind the curb for better bicycle safety. And as I mentioned earlier, this would be from 12th Street to Washington Avenue on the north end of this section of Hennepin Avenue. They're doing several phases of this project. They're cutting it from the southern section of 12th Street to 7th Street. They're doing utility relocation work this year, actually starting earlier this month, and then roadway construction in 2020. Then they're doing the north half of the corridor from 7th Street to Washington, utility work in 2021, and the roadway reconstruction in 2022. So this is a 4-year construction project with 4 years of transit impacts. In terms of bus operations after construction, and Dave will talk a little bit about bus operations during construction, what this will leave in terms of bus stops in the corridors, it will reduce the number of bus stops in the corridor from 13 to 8, but the bus stops will usually be longer, allowing more buses to stop at a given time and let passengers on and off, as well as providing more space for larger shelters with heat and light and real-time signs at the stop to provide information to customers when the next bus is coming, as well as any service disruptions. And then the bike lanes that would be behind the curb, where there's not a bus stop, those would be directly behind the curb. Where there is a bus stop, they would go behind the bus stop, so customers would have to would have to go from the bus stop, across the bike lane to the sidewalk and vice versa. That's been a concern of both the city and Metro Transit, and we've been working with them to try and have well-identified, safe crossing so that people can feel safe getting to and from the bus stop. And Metro Trans has been involved for well over a year in this now planning process. We worked with the city to identify bus stop locations. We're currently reviewing the city's designs. They're between 60 and 90% designs. The plan to go out and advertise for construction contractors to bid on this by the end of this calendar year. And then the city will be doing a lot of work on the project. We'll be looking to reimburse them for transit-related costs, including design, construction, and then it's looking like there is going to be one easement within the property. So having the ability to put transit facility or use part of a private property for transit as well as bike and pedestrian travel. So those will be some business items that will be coming to this committee later on this year.
So what we have here is a visual of our detour operations. It started a week ago today on April 15th, and I can tell you that it's going quite well. Things are going much smoother than we anticipated, and it is all our Hennepin Avenue routes and service between Washington and 12th is routed through downtown by Nicollet Mall, again between Washington and 12th and 13th. So we have an ongoing conversations with our DID folks and our business leaders, and of course our city leaders, to discuss those great events, Minneapolis Pride and the Aquatennial. And so just as recently as Thursday, it has been decided that the Minneapolis Pride will occur on 2nd Avenue. It will not occur on Nicollet Mall. And the Aquatennial, we're still in negotiations and discussions of how and where that event should occur. We're also actively working with our partners in the business community as to how to handle those events, such as the farmers market, makers market, and those other events, of course, that require the activation of the mall. And so we're working very closely with them in partnership to make sure that the activation of the malls can continue with a little or minimal impact to our transit customers as well. So this is our plan going forward for sure for 2 years. Depending on what happens after the first phase, when Hennepin is fully completed between 7th and 12th, we'll evaluate our operations there and see what we could do to kind of shorten the detour and, of course, the impact on the mall itself. So it's an ongoing conversation that we're having with our partners with Minneapolis and the business community, but all in all, it has given an exceptional rating by our partners in the traffic department with Minneapolis. So things are going very well.
And with this, Madam Chair and committee members, we'll take any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Could you describe some of the ways, thank you, Chair, how you said that there are concerns, and understandably so, around the bikes lanes and the bus stops. What are some of are there ideas that have come to the forefront about how to deal with those potential conflicts, or is it too early to point out potential ideas?
Madam Chair and committee members, there have been some initial ideas that have gone through, and even at 60% plans, there are some more defined plans on what that crossing will be and what the bus stop area would be like. One is they're looking at including some railings at the back of the bus stop to kind of limit the ability of people to cross in certain areas. They're especially concerned about the areas near the bus shelters where, because of the structure, there's less visibility for somebody coming out of the bus area or bus stop area. They'll also have painted pedestrian crossings, and it's still to be determined whether there'll be any signage. And then there'll also be a education component as the project is going through and before it opens, of reaching out to bicycle and pedestrian and Committee of People with Disabilities. They've been involved with the city committees for those who've been involved in the design. I'll be giving a presentation to the Met Council Transit Accessibility Advisory Committee next week on this to kind of give them an update and have them provide an opportunity to provide feedback or ideas for safe crossings.
I'd love to see any suggestions that we're having come up as it relates to those as well. And it'd be great to know also when we get the follow-up, I'm guessing we'll get one at some point in time in the future. What are the best practices that have been done, whether it's in other parts of our country or in Europe, that we've modeled our decision after. Sometimes we feel a need to kind of make up stuff, especially the Minnesota way. And I hope that we can also take in some great examples of people who've put this stuff on the ground already and see what it looks like. Last piece I'm wondering is, do we have this already in downtown Minneapolis where there is an off-road bike infrastructure? I was thinking maybe it's Washington or runs parallel to Washington.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Council, yes, on Washington Avenue when Hennepin County did reconstruction, they did put a bike path behind the curb up on the same level as the sidewalk. It does have bus stops. It doesn't have quite as much transit usage as Hennepin Avenue does. But they've done that. They've actually learned some lessons from that. I think hearing back from Minneapolis Traffic Department, they're not planning on including bicycle-only lights to indicate for crossings, but they will be following a lot of the same markings just to kind of make those more universally recognized.
Councilmember Atlas, and you
One more follow-up. Oh, and I just lost it. Maybe I'll remember it.
Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious, I know there's great deal of sensitivity for both businesses and residents downtown after the Nicollet Mall project, and I'm wondering what lessons, in addition to bike and ped, might have been learned that we're incorporating into the Hennepin Avenue reconstruction to kind of mitigate some of the issues that came up along Nicollet.
Madam Chair and committee members, I guess we've been involved kind of on the transit component. The city's designer and the city's the city's public works department have kind of been more involved in the overall project. I know that they've been doing a lot of outreach with property owners, community members, having a lot of open houses to try and get the information out there and provide information early on, but also hear back from some of the people or some of the groups on what they would like to see. I think they've been incorporating some of that information into the phasing that I talked about, stretching it out over 4 years to try and hopefully lessen the impact block by block. They'd still be, for example, during the utility work, it'd still be allowing one lane of traffic in each direction as opposed to completely closing off the corridor. I can follow up with the city public works contact and designer to kind of find what lessons learned they've used and been applying for those.
Yeah, I know a lot of it falls to the public works, but some of it also involved transit in general. I just wondered if there were some major things that we learned that we're able to bring to our next project. Hopefully we continue to get smarter all the time.
Yes, and Madam Chair and committee members, I think we've learned a little bit on Nicollet Mall about being able to better define the bus stop at the very end of, or where the buses stop, communicating that better to customers so that they know where to wait, queue up for the first bus. Learn some things about the technology that was installed. Some of the bus shelter walls are incorporating that. There will be a separate area for kind of communications equipment. We have been looking at making some changes and improving some fiber aspects of it to be able to communicate, provide better communications to the technology of the area. Dave, did you want to say anything?
Madam Chair, committee member, yes, I think like Paul alluded to, is the stop locations, the activations, where will the activations occur, what type of activations will there be, as well as the consolidation of bus stops. We went from 13 to 8. I think we've learned a lot over on the Nicollet Mall project that we have applied, I believe, as it relates to transportation and how to make it more effective and efficient and less imposing on those who might not utilize our service or understand what our service provides. So I believe that we have done so.
Right. Thank you.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Madam Chair, thank you for the presentation. I have a couple questions, and one is just a comment. I'm really happy to see that the improvements on the bus shelters are including heat. So that's great that we can incorporate that. And then the second question is, and hopefully you haven't talked about this, I don't want to repeat, but for the behind the curve options that are going to be for the left turns and also the bike lanes, did you have to reduce the size of the sidewalks, or how did you incorporate that?
Madam Chair and committee members, a lot of the roadway and bike lane movements were designed by the city designer. So I can't remember exactly what they did. I know that they solicited input from both their bicycle advisory committee, pedestrian advisory committee, and committee on people with disabilities to try and get a better sense of whether it'd be better or safer for the bike lane to be near the curb at an area where somebody might be taking a right turn, as well as, or whether it should be better to be further away at a corner where a car might be taking a right turn. I think the idea was to have it a little further away so that the bicycle rider would have more, and pedestrians would have more time to react, and that the field of vision from the driver would be better able to see people who will be better able to see people who are crossing as they're planning to turn. Was your question about left turn lanes, though?
Well, that's additional information, so I appreciate that about the safety part, but I was just wondering, is there going to be a reduction in the width of the sidewalk as well
Madam Chair, and
to accommodate those changes?
No, they're planning on having a consistent 10-foot wide pedestrian area sidewalk width. There would be kind of where the bicycle lane is directly behind the curb. Then there would be an area usually about 9 feet where they call it a furnishing zone, where there might be trees or benches or some other area. They're very adamant that they want to keep the 10-foot through pedestrian zone and then kind of have additional space for either pedestrians or people who just want to sit and enjoy a sunny day, hopefully.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
I remembered my question. It was regarding left-turning bike movements. Given that design, are they planning on bike boxes, or what's the mitigation or signaling to assist with a bicyclist who's trying to make a left turn at an intersection? If you know. If you don't, it's okay.
Madam Chair and committee member, I believe that they're, and actually related to what I was talking about a minute ago, by having the bike lane a little further away from the curb at the intersections, they're planning on allowing the bicyclist to kind of get out of the bike lane, either, well, I probably should check with them on some of the details on this, but either on the sidewalk area or at the very curb on the cross street, to be able to get set up to move, to take the left turn and go across Hennepin Avenue with that east-west traffic signal.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you, gentlemen. All right, next we are on to next information item is Metro Transit customer survey results, and we have Eric Linter.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Eric Lind. I'm the Manager of Research and Analytics in the Strategic Initiatives Group inside Metro Transit. And I'm excited to present to you today some of the things we've learned about how our customers are experiencing our service with our rider survey. I want to give you a little bit of context in terms of the different ways that we try to find out how people are experiencing our service. And so I'm listing some of those ways here. We have a customer relations department that's dedicated to hearing from our customers, and they hear from 80,000 people per year calling and emailing, telling us about things that are going on. But we also do some systematic inventory of people through survey work. The survey I'm going to present to you today is known as the customer survey, the rider survey, satisfaction survey. Has been done historically every 2 years. There are also 2 efforts led by Met Council staff that are called travel behavior inventories. One of them is ongoing right now, which is the household travel behavior inventory, which is kind of getting a picture of the regional travel patterns in every mode across the region. There's also a particular form of the TBI, travel behavior inventory, that's done onboard transit every 5 years. I'll talk more about that in a minute. We also do, our customer services department, the marketing department, does a brand survey where they survey both riders and non-riders around the region to kind of understand what their impressions are of Metro Transit. And then we have recently started something we're calling Metro Transit Riders Club, where we can use the time and knowledge of some of our most loyal and also excited users, kind of our power users, if you will, to sort of test some different concepts and ask them in detail about aspects of service that we're interested in improving. So, and then just as a note, you know, we're also looking at a lot of different other ways to get feedback from people, including kind of more high frequency questionnaires and live feedback via text and things like that. But that's just to give you a sense that we are asking our customers how things are going in lots of different ways. So we want to survey our customers for a few main purposes. We want to know who's on board in terms of demographics. We want to know that for many different reasons. We want to know how they're using the system. In other words, what lines are they taking, where are they going from and to, and then what are the purposes of those trips. And all of that helps us plan better, right? Helps us understand the needs of our users and how we can optimize our system to meet them. Those first two concepts, kind of like who's on board and where are they going, those are really well answered by this travel behavior inventory and the transit onboard. And the reason that those are well captured there is because this is set up as a statistically robust sample, kind of proportional to the ridership by each line, where trained interviewers get on board and they're given instructions like, take the 4th person that gets on board and the 11th person that gets on board, ask them these questions. And it's basically like, who are you, where are you going, where are you coming from, and what's the purpose of your trip? So by doing that across, in the last travel behavior inventory survey in 2016, there were over 33,000 individuals encountered on transit and asked these questions. So it's a really robust way of answering the question, who's on board with it? And that lets us put together things like this infographic, which you hopefully have seen. If not, I can make sure you see it again. But it sort of gives the flow of kind of who our ridership is, how they go in terms of their mode, and where they're going in terms of their typical destination. So this is all very good information at a high level, and we can drill down in individual lines and see what the ridership looks like. But what it doesn't give us is this second piece, which is what are the perceptions of people as they ride? What is their sense of satisfaction? What are their opinions about our service? And so that's where we have to go back out and ask customers directly about some different aspects of how we're doing, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. Okay, so in the customer satisfaction survey, what do we ask? We first want to get a sense of their overall impressions of Metro Transit, how we're doing in general. So if I say, like, what do you think of Metro Transit? Are you happy or not? We also ask kind of a marketing traditional question of what is your likelihood to recommend? So if you are going to talk to a colleague or family member, are you saying, you know what, Metro Transit is great, get on board? Or are you saying, you don't know? So those kind of high-level concept questions of, you know, how are we doing? We also then drill down and ask a bunch of different questions or have people rate us on different aspects of our service. So that includes the fares in terms of, are you getting value for your money? And also, can you figure out how much you have to pay? Trip planning, how you figure out where to go. The waiting experience, which is part of a transit experience, is always going to be waiting for the vehicle. And then the onboard experience as well. We ask people about their use of the system in terms of when they go and which modes they take. And then we ask the demographics as well for reasons that I will elaborate in a second. So to implement this survey, it's a big effort. It's a collaborative effort inside Metro Transit. The customer services and marketing department is kind of the driver of this. My group inside the strategic initiatives department helps design the survey and does a lot of the analysis of the survey. We really couldn't do it without the operations side of the house. The bus and rail operations make this happen. Specifically, the bus operators will one day randomly have an envelope that then they have to distribute the surveys from. We pick random trips, kind of proportional to the survey targets, and so you never quite know like whether your assignment that day is going to be to pass out surveys. So we always appreciate that they're able to do that. And we had a marketing firm supporting this in this as well. So last November, there were 2 weekdays and a Saturday where these surveys were distributed. We did these paper surveys on all different modes, again, sort of proportional to the number of people that ride those modes. And then we also did personal intercepts on the light rail, which just took the form of someone passing out the survey and asking people, would you mind filling it out? People could either fill them out and leave them on the seat, or leave them in an envelope on the vehicle, or they could mail them in with the postage paid, or they could also be directed to an online version of the survey. And so that was also promoted at the same time period through social media and our other channels to try to get people to respond. The online survey we had in both English and Spanish. So this is what our response looks like. And starting from the left, we have local bus, which was the highest number of completed responses, which is what we were going for because that's where most of our riders are. Express bus, A line, blue line, green line, North Star, and red line. So you'll see the colors, they represent the different ways that people return these surveys. The green, they return them in the vehicle as they fill them out. Yellow were mailed back in, and then blue were online. So you see we have a huge proportion of online responses, which is fairly new to this survey. In prior years, we didn't have quite so many online, but I think it's a good and interesting addition to the survey. One of the things we'll also be able to do, which I don't have results for you today, but we're going to be looking at the difference between the online survey and the paper survey and asking, can we, in the future, kind of either substitute or somehow subset online surveys to augment what we do in paper, because it is a giant effort in terms of the printing and distribution of those paper surveys. Okay, so now I want to go back to the difference between this Transit Onboard TBI survey and the customer survey we just completed. As I mentioned, the Transit Onboard survey has this statistical sampling method where we're pretty sure the answers that people give to those questions represent a snapshot of who's on board, whereas the survey responses represent a snapshot of who responded to the survey. And because we know that those two are not necessarily the same, and I'll go through why, we have to address that somehow when we look at the results of the customer survey. So what I'm showing you here is bin bars by age group, and the colors represent genders. And what you can see is on the left-hand side, there's not quite as many people in the customer survey as there are in the TBI. So basically there are not quite as many as percentage young people responding to the customer survey as are on board our vehicles. And you can't really tell by the colors, but there's also more females responding to the customer survey than there are as a percent of who's on board. Similarly, looking at income, we have a much higher percentage of people who are making above $100,000 a year in terms of their household income. These are all self-reported measures. Then you'd find typically on board. And likewise, looking at self-reported race or ethnicity, we have underrepresentation of African American and overrepresentation of white Caucasian. And so all of this basically means the survey respondents are older, whiter, richer, more likely to be female. That just means that's the group of people who are more likely to be willing to fill out the survey, which is fine. What it means also then is if we want to make valid conclusions about how our customers feel in general, we have to do some weighting. And so we take these differences between what we think is a good characterization of our ridership and who responded to the survey, we try to match them up. So essentially what happens is if you responded to the survey and you are a 42-year-old white female making over $100,000 a year, your survey results count for a little bit less than someone else who's not represented properly in the survey distribution. That makes sense. Happy to talk more about that if you want. But the rest of what I'm going to present, the results are the weighted results. So they're meant to be representative of the ridership as a whole. Okay, I'm going to present three different aspects of the results, just overall satisfaction. I'm going to talk a little bit about the particular service aspects, and then a few kind of nuggets that are important for how we're responding to these results. The first result is overall we are actually doing pretty well. We have 87% of the people who responded saying that we are, either somewhat or very satisfied. Sorry for the small legend there. Throughout the talk, the dark blue to dark red scale is going to be the same. So dark blue is really good, dark red is really bad. We want to see blues and dark blues as you go forward. In any case, so very satisfied is dark blue. That light blue is somewhat satisfied. And you put those two together, and you get 87%. That compares to 2 years ago when we did this, it was at 91%. The only thing I'll point out about that difference, which may be meaningful, is that in 2016, because we didn't have that TBI on board to kind of do that bias correction, I'm not sure how much of that is actually declining satisfaction and how much is just not accounting for the fact that different types of people are responding. In any case, so we also ask people, so given a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is I'll never recommend you, and 10 is I will definitely recommend you, or I already have recommended you, and where do you fall? And what you see is that most people are in that 8, 9, 10 range. The sort of marketing lingo is that if you're in 9 or 10, you're in the high likelihood to recommend group. We had 57% there. And again, slightly lower than 2016, where we're at 63%. If you look at the difference between those very high 9 and 10 group and the bottom half, 0 to 6, a little bit more than half, there's 41% more in that very high group. And that's another sort of measure of 41% being the net promoter score, which is something that compares favorably, again, with other sort of large companies and industries. Okay, so just to pause for a minute to look at that overall satisfaction. Again, dark blue is very satisfied, light blue is somewhat satisfied. By mode, so again, we distributed these surveys differently, and the mode just refers to wherever the survey was taken. So people obviously take more than one mode, but this anchors their results in that particular way. So we have local bus, we have express bus. The Met Council, of course Nick just left the room, but the Met Council refers to the fixed route service that is subcontracted by Met Council for Metro Transit. So that's routes like Route 30 and 87. There's the A line, blue line, green line, North Star, and red line. Okay. So there are a couple of things you can tell right away that there is a difference across different modes in terms of satisfaction. The North Star and red line have much higher satisfaction on average than, say, local bus. Express bus is usually higher than local bus respondents. In years past, we've noticed that in the A line in 2016 looked a lot more like a light rail line than it did local bus in terms of satisfaction, and that holds true again here. Another indication of how kind of successful that rollout has been. One thing that is different is that green line in 2018 looks a lot more like the local bus numbers than it does like blue line, A line. So that's something that might be reflective of some other things we're hearing about green line experiences. Okay, so that's sort of the overall picture. What we really want to do to connect this back to what we're doing is understand what people are responding to when they say they're satisfied or not satisfied. So we want to take this and put it towards something we actually change inside our operations. We want to know what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and then how we connect that to overall satisfaction. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a few highlights and lowlights in terms of individual aspects of our service. Again, we asked about 22 different components of our service. These are the top 3 that people rated. Vehicles are easily accessible. I can find the schedule for the bus or train I want to ride, and it is clear where the bus or train will take me. So those are all very highly rated aspects of our service. People understand what they're getting into in terms of the schedules and the routes. And I think that's reflective of work that's been done recently where, in the past few years, we've replaced all the bus stops throughout the system, done a lot of work on our website and other communication, helping people find out where they want to go and what time you can get there. Okay, so there are some lowlights too, areas that need improvement. So these are the 3 things that scored sort of the lowest on average when you look at satisfaction or agreement with these statements. The first is that other riders are friendly and inclusive. But less than 20% of the people who responded strongly agree with that statement. This is one that's perennially very low in terms of rating for Metro Transit, is like the other people on board. And that's something that's been consistent the past few surveys that we've done. It's also something that typically they don't give us a lot of necessarily weight for, so like people don't necessarily punish us for that in terms of their overall responses. And that's true again here in terms of its importance value. I'll come back to that. The other two are, I can find the information I need about detours. So detours are a very common chronic problem for transit, just like other ways of getting around the city. In our case, there's also the component of being able to communicate to people, detours are happening, here's where you find your bus. You know, when we have the Hennepin Avenue project like you just heard about, we can do a lot of outreach and do a lot of, you know, communicating and find our regular customers and tell them what's going on. Smaller detours are ones that are more on the fly or are very hard to communicate, and they can be a real source of frustration for people, as you might imagine. The last one is that stations and stops are clean and comfortable. So that, maybe going back to the suggestion of needing heat at a shelter and other maintenance. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that during February and the snow that was going on, that's going to be a big pain point for people trying to get to the bus. Okay, so we've got 22 of those different ratings. And what we want to do with this next bit is understand how that connects up to the overall satisfaction level. So the way we do that is we look at, for each person who responded, we look at each of their scores of those 22 things, and then their overall satisfaction rating. We kind of try to ask which ones best match that overall satisfaction. Okay, so what aspects did they rate that looks most like their overall impression? When you do that across all 9,000 plus people, and account for the fact that people tend to answer the survey, you know, in a certain way, which we can do statistically, we can get what we call an importance value. And that importance value tells us what is the influence of that aspect of service on the overall satisfaction. Okay. And in that way, if I knew your answer to this one aspect of service, I'd have a pretty good idea of what your overall experience was like. That's the idea. Okay. So this is a fun visualization. I call it confetti plot. But bear with me as I try to explain this to you. So we've arranged kind of how we're doing versus how important it is on two different axes here. So as you go from left to right, each of these points represents one of the aspects of service. And from left to right, we're getting better in how we're doing. Okay? So when you, it goes from sort of neither nor, kind of neutral. That middle vertical line is the somewhat agree, and the strongly agree is on the far right. And these are sort of average takes of people on these aspects. So left to right, you're getting better. Bottom to top, you're getting more important. And again, more important means, in this sense, more influential on your overall satisfaction. Okay. And you can see we split it up by different categories. We'd really love for everything to be in the top right quadrant, where we're doing really well, and it's the things that matter to people. We want to stay away from, you know, having too many things on that left higher end. But of course, we do need to recognize there are some things that are driving people's opinions. So there was one dot that's up there on the far left that's far and away more important, so almost twice as important as any other aspect of service. And this is the thing that best predicts how people rate us in terms of our overall satisfaction. And sort of the drama of this animation is somewhat undermined by you already having the printout in front of you. But it is the bus or train is on time. Okay? So their vehicle, their trip being on time is the most important thing for customers in terms of connecting to their overall satisfaction. And as you can see, we're not necessarily doing great on that all the time, which we measure a lot and know very well. The next most important thing, I feel safe and secure while on board a bus or train. So people that strongly agreed with that statement, I feel safe and secure, they also had very high satisfaction ratings, and vice versa. they disagreed. They did not have very high satisfaction rates. Total travel time is reasonable. Okay? So as people think about their trip and they think about their trip on transit, they're evaluating not just, did it come on time, but in the end, how long did it take me to get there versus other modes? And kind of lurking in the background of all this is, when we think about our customers, we know that people have choices and people can take other ways of getting around. There's the short version. The way I think about this is the car is the competition, right? So if you look at these aspects, is it going to be on time? How long is it going to take? Am I going to be safe when I'm on board? If you have bad answers to those questions when you think about Metro Transit, then you're probably not going to get on, or you're going to ride less often. So these are things that we need to try to address so that we remain, the option for people as they travel. Okay. So I'm happy to go through more of what these other points are. I mean, I think one other one that's kind of, it does work. So this guy right there, that little pink one, is kind of the best performing in terms of being to the right and being up. That's actually the statement that the fares are a good value, which is kind of comforting because about a year before this survey was implemented, we raised the fare. So that's an indication that even though the fare went up, our customers still think it's pretty good. Okay, so now I want to go through a few notable findings, and these are just things that we asked because we want to know what the state of things is and also to motivate action within our agency, which I think is definitely happening. So the first one is just looking at harassment. What we did was we had a yes-no statement. In the past year, have you experienced harassment, which we defined as unwanted comments, touching, suggestions? And you can see there's a very high proportion of people that responded yes. So 27% of women, 43% of customers who responded that they were non-binary to the gender question, 8% of male customers report in the past year experiencing harassment at some point during their transit experience. And when you look at, this focused even more in terms of women under 35, it's just almost kind of overwhelming. It's like 37% responding yes in the past year. So when we combine this with what we know about, for instance, declining number of people using our College Pass products, for instance, we think about whether we can think about the millennial generation or following generations as, transit customers for life. We want people to think about transit as a place where it's safe for them to travel, and this is an indication that it's not. And in fact, when you look at kind of what best predicts people's satisfaction across the whole survey, this is pretty much it. This is the strongest predictor. If you've experienced harassment or reported that you did, you will not have a good impression of transit, even if you're still using it. So I should also note that, it's April, so we've been doing a month-long campaign about, respect and kindness and inclusivity on transit. And that's in large part been motivated by this question, which was also asked in 2016 with similar results. And I think our agency is taking it seriously and trying to figure out ways that we can improve the climate around and on transit. Okay, so I also just wanted to give an indication of how overall satisfaction broke down by self-reported ethnicity. There really aren't big differences with the exception of Hispanic Latino, which is slightly higher actually than other races in terms of overall satisfaction. But in general, there's not a great deal of discrepancy. I put a little asterisk on the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander bar chart just to indicate that there's a very small number of responses. Again, this is a question we ask to know, also to be able to wait. It does occasionally bring out some resistance from people, so that other category, which also seems to have kind of a lower satisfaction rating, as I think we allowed people to fill in what their other was, and I think the most common one was human. And so there's people that would rather not answer this question when they're asked about their satisfaction, which is fine. Doing the same thing by income, again, not strong differences. There's a little bit of a subtle effect. If you look at that dark blue line, it kind of is more like a U or like a little bowl. We've seen that before in other versions of the survey, which is kind of the middle income group in our definitions here. Often has a little bit lower satisfaction than both the really low end and the really high end. And then I'll just, one more breakout, which is the overall satisfaction by the primary reason people use transit. And they're kind of ordered from least to most dissatisfaction, if you will. So the two that are at the top are that I use transit because it saves time or because I can do other things with my time while I'm riding. And people who kind of think that that's what their transit experience is, it's fast and I don't have to worry about driving, they like transit a lot. The farther you get down into like, I do it because it's subsidized by my employer or I don't have access to a car, you get more and more dissatisfaction happening. So kind of the more people feel like they're not choosing that they're on transit, there might be more dissatisfaction. All right, so I'll end with what I thought was a really good piece of news as well. We asked people to agree or disagree with the statement, Metro Transit benefits my community, even those who don't ride frequently. And we got really good responses from this, looking at both strongly and somewhat agree, we're at 86%, something like that. So I think for our riders at least, which is the respondents here, they understand the benefits of Metro Transit, even to people who don't ride, whether the people in a car, people who just need to know that that kind of baseline mobility is there no matter what. Okay, so internally in our organization, we have a few next steps. We have a visualization app that we've built so that people in our staff can access these questions and dig in and cross-tab however they want. We're making a sort of more formal report document, and we're obviously working with our business units to understand how they can take these responses and actually start to make changes that'll mean that we can give our customers the best service they need so that we can have satisfaction be high. So thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Quickly, before we move to questions, I'm going to let you know that we're going to move the regional solicitation item to next meeting. So there's time for questions now because we also have TAC interviews in a little while. So we're doing a little last minute shuffling. So with that, any questions? Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Thanks so much for this presentation, Chair. And one of the things I'd like to just encourage is at our meeting on the 25th, we talked about there not being any disparities, or we didn't talk about it, but staff reported there aren't any disparities. I think one of the things that would go a long way to helping with that is when we do collect the information directly from riders about their experience, if we could disaggregate that information. And I appreciate that you had a number around satisfaction that was disaggregated and also around gender and harassment. But it would be nice to see the full breadth of the report and the option, I think looking at income level and then also disaggregated by race, ethnicity would be very helpful in order to address a common thing that I hear of from constituents is that they believe that they experience and they report that they experience disparate service. And I think another question in the future that might be helpful to add related to that is people experiencing racism while on transit. It's different than harassment. I mean, maybe someone could see that as harassing, but I've experienced it. I don't know that I would define it in that way. And I think that would be an example of something that would also maybe address some of the perceptions that they experience, either from other riders or from the operator. Thank you.
Madam Chair, committee members, those are good suggestions. We'll make sure we have those disaggregated results. The harassment question was worded to be really specific to sexual harassment. So I don't think it would have been misinterpreted that way, but that is a good suggestion for following.
And it's a great question.
Councilmember Fredson.
Thank you, Chair. I have three quick questions. So the first one is, do you ask, as far as like, are you a first-time rider or second-time rider? I guess where I'm going with that is that I feel like people's first rides or second rides can be really impactful as to whether or not they continue riding or not.
Yes, Madam Chair, committee members. We ask not quite that granular, but we ask how long have you been riding with Metro Transit, and sort of like less than a year, 1 to 3 years, and on, those kind of bins. The highest satisfaction ratings are always on the lowest end of that scale. So people who are riding earlier on are usually more satisfied in general than people that have been riding for a long time. Last 2 years anyway, or last 2 surveys, sorry.
And second question, Chair. On slide 20 to 27, there's the scale of like neither agree nor disagree, somewhat agree, strongly agree. Did you ask disagree? I'm assuming you did. It doesn't show up on this.
Oh, okay. So, Madam Chair, committee members, thank you for that question. What these dots represent the median or average response. And as you saw at the very beginning, most of our responses are so positive that they're actually all up in that space. So there aren't any that averaged that low. Even the really bad ones are still in that above neutral.
Yep. Okay. Great. And Chair, thank you, Chair. Third question was, what about specific routes? Did you drill down? Are you able to figure out that, wow, there's actually more dissatisfaction on one specific bus route versus generally all bus versus like you do with the light rail?
Thanks, Madam Chair, committee members. We did not drill down farther than this breakout here, which is by kind of the finest grain mode that we use. The reason for that is really logistic because of the need to distribute these paper surveys to actually put them on physical buses, and actually finding out where buses are going to be working or what routes are going to be working is something that doesn't happen until kind of right before they leave the garage in most cases. The dispatching is pretty fluid. And it would be sort of an order of magnitude more effort to get to that route level focus, when really the purpose of this survey is kind of a system level question. We have done lots of targeted sampling on certain routes, like we've done Route 19 recently in preparation for C-Line. We've done other segments of routes where we have particular questions of interest, but we haven't broken this down because we just don't actually know when they're on the local bus what route they're on. And I guess another way of answering that is the purpose of this survey is kind of to figure out how people feel about the network or system as a whole. We could ask people, okay, if you were on Route 22, tell us about this and this, but it's also true that they're probably on the light rail, or they might have transferred from the 22 to the 10, whatever. So it's hard to isolate a particular line with this general survey, I guess, for both those 2 reasons.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sterner.
Madam Chair, Mr. Lind, so on the same slide, and look at the red line, which is, basically my district and right outside my office door. There's no negative comments. Do you know why that would be? And then do they use as a benchmark with the customer service satisfaction with the other lines that you're seeing in areas?
Yeah, it's true. I think that, so there are about, didn't really mention this, but I guess back here I did, but total survey was, so I think there are about 250 responses from Redline. And yeah, I don't think that there were actually any strong dissatisfactions in terms of overall results. Both the Redline and North Star are really high performers. They're also, they have a lot of advantages for the people that use them, right? When we talk about that speed, that reliability, and the sense that you're saving time over the other potential modes. And I think that's probably a lot of what drives that satisfaction.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions again on the demographics of the survey responders. I think the TBI response information was that 23% of the riders were of Black or African background.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yep.
Okay. But the customer survey was that only about 10% of that demographic answered.
Yes.
I'm wondering if it's because a large number of that 23% were non-English speakers, Somali, for example. And related to that, it would be, the harassment or the dissatisfaction with the service. I think that certain communities, especially the Somali community, might have a different experience than African Americans who were born and raised here. Anybody who's watching the news will know why. So I think that particular population should be disaggregated in the way in which you do the survey and trying to understand their level of satisfaction and how safe they feel on our buses. Again, so you mentioned that the surveys were sent in English and Spanish, but not in Somali. So just try to focus on that particular community simply because of the numbers that I'm seeing. I don't think that we're capturing their experience. And, that might be useful for us to know.
Madam Chair, committee members, that's a great suggestion, and it's definitely true that we did not probably capture the full range of our ridership, especially in terms of people who don't use English as a primary language. We know that is, it's a significant portion of our ridership, and that's not something that we were able to address in this survey. So I think it's a good suggestion for future surveys to make sure we focus on that. In terms of disaggregation, we did not, except unless people specify as sort of the other in this self-reporting, we did not disaggregate by ethnicity like Somali within Black African American.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, if not, thank you very much. And then before we adjourn, we've got some handy dandy Metro Transit facts. They're newly published that General Manager Koister put on the table if you want to grab on your way out. But if there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.